Okay, folks, we'll make a start. You're very welcome to tonight's webinar. As you can see, what the topic that we're covering tonight is the pillars of performance and goal setting. Just before we start, a couple of wee housekeeping things. Firstly, if everybody can manually turn off their camera, I'm having a wee look here, and I don't think anybody has theirs on. So if anybody's coming in late or whatever, we'll just have to speak to them or ask them to turn the camera off. You're automatically muted. The webinar is being recorded and will be uploaded to the Ulster GAA YouTube page. I've received some questions already. I think when you registered, you had the opportunity to leave some questions. I have about 2 of those that I'm going to answer at the end. The other thing that I'll do as well is I'll invite questions through the chat box towards the end as well, and I'll probably take about 2 to 3 of those as well. Tonight, as I mentioned, we're going to cover the areas around pillars of performance and goal setting. Hopefully, what you'll understand at the end of this session is how to profile your strengths and weaknesses as a player. Now, I recognise that we've got a lot of different, I suppose, participants on tonight. We've got players, we've got coaches, we've got parents as well. So what I'll try to do is I'll try to break that down, and I'll try to, I suppose, angle it from whatever way you're coming. So very, very important. We'll have a look at actually the structure of how you profile your strengths and weaknesses as a player or as a coach working with a player. The other thing we'll do is we'll be able to identify areas that need extra attention. So the things that are important to your game or your player's game, maybe something that's letting them down, something that, as is written here, is needing extra attention. We'll be able to identify those areas. We'll move on then to the importance of goal setting. Why is goal setting so important? And the last thing is how to set goals to improve performance. Okay, and the strength that's in goal setting as well. Okay, so the pillars of performance, it might be a term that you're not familiar with, or you might have heard of it maybe using a different term. Basically, what the pillars of performance is identifying your strengths and weaknesses as a player. Okay, every player desires success. For some, that means winning medals, but not for everybody. Whatever team you play on, sometimes it's not realistic that you can actually win a medal. Okay, so your responsibility is more than just winning. It's about maximizing your potential and performing as close to your potential in each and every match. Okay, so that's your job as a player, is to play to your limit, to maximize your potential. And I've got it underlined here and in bold as well. Your job as a player is to consistently improve. Okay, as a player, there's so many things thrown at you. There's tactics coming at you, there's fitness coming at you, there's so many different advice coming from all the different angles. Once you strip it all back, your job as a player, whether you're a young player or whether you're going into your last year playing whatever it is, your job is to consistently improve and get better. All right, and that's, I think, what the pillars of performance are about. Okay, to improve, it's essential that you profile your strengths and weaknesses and identify the areas that need extra attention. Okay, so what are we looking for? Gaelic football and hurling, what contributes? What are the things that make the difference? Okay, for a player to perform, there are 5 areas that contribute, and you can see over here on the image. Physical, obviously that's important. Your physical fitness, your strength, your power, things like that. Now, one thing I find is a lot of players, maybe young players, put a lot of emphasis in this area. And need to be stronger or need to be fitter and stuff like that. And quite often that can be to the detriment of the other areas. To me, it's a complete package. These 5 things all have to be adhered to enable a player to be at their best. Okay, so we've talked about the physical, the technical. Really, that's around your skills. We think about our catching and our kicking and things like that, but maybe some of the other areas that we don't even realize come in under our skills is our tackling technique, and maybe our handling. Are you able to take the ball first time, or are you somebody that's going for the ball and taking 2 or 3 goes to get it? So the technical surrounds our skills. Tactical's got so important now. In most teams, even underage teams, go out and they've got tactics, and you ask yourself as a player, or indeed ask yourself as a coach, do do my players really understand what I'm asking them to do? Or as a player, I'm being asked to play a sweeper here, I'm being asked to do this as a third midfielder or whatever. Do I really know what it is that I'm being asked to do? The mental side of things is very important as well. You know, are you confident? You know, are you resilient? Do you allow mistakes to eat at you for the rest of the game, or do you get over things pretty quick? And then the last pillar, as we talk about, is our lifestyle. And I'm sure we've all seen it. There's some players that they're very good in the other four, but sometimes their lifestyle lets them down. You know, maybe their eating habits aren't good. Maybe their sleep habits aren't good. Maybe they're not hydrated. Things like that, get injured a lot. So again, just to stress, for the total package, I think you've got to recognize that you have to be proficient in all 5 areas in order to maximize your potential. What I would do is, and I'll tell you in a minute how you can actually get this template. I would break the template down into the 5 areas that we've talked about. Okay, and I would, for example, if you're a player, I would sit down and actually go down through it. Where are my strengths and where are my weaknesses? If you're a coach sitting down to do it with a player, or probably in today's circumstances, you might be doing it over Zoom. The thing to remember is it's always player led. It's not led by the coach. The coach can't tell the player, you know, this is your strengths and weaknesses. This is your in the physical area. This is your strengths and weaknesses in the technical area. It's always led by the player, and the player is the one who informs what you put in on the actual template. So just to break it down as simply as possible, the first thing you would do is, for each of the 5 pillars, so the physical, technical, mental, and lifestyle, you'll ask the player to reflect on 3 areas that are important to them or relevant to their game. And when I say relevant to their game, what I mean is, you know, a midfielder is going to be very different from a cornerback, from a goalkeeper, from a corner forward. So, you know, everybody's going to be different. So physically, you'll ask the player to come up with 3 things that's important to them. And one thing I would stress to you as well is, don't just say strength or fitness. I'd really try to tease out what aspect of your physical conditioning is it that's important to you. So this player has put down the ability to perform repeated sprints. They've been specific here, their upper body strength, their speed off the mark. Those are the 3 areas physically that's important to them for their game. Moving on to technical, they've identified their shooting accuracy to be important, their tackling technique, and being able to catch a high ball. Tactical, okay, and we mentioned this earlier, the understanding of, do they really understand what it is they're being asked to do? Is their positioning good? And are they able to read the game? Mental. So the mental side of things, a lot of athletes now talk about their pre-game routine. You know, there actually is a set routine that they follow that gets them into gets the best out of themselves when they actually go out onto the field. Also, the ability to cope with mistakes. Some players that we see are very, very quick to let mistakes go. Other people, you know, once they make a mistake, that stays with them for the rest of the game. And discipline obviously comes in under the mental side of things as well. Lifestyle, this can be things away from the pitch, as we mentioned earlier. So their time management, how important is that? The high standard of schoolwork. So, for example, this is a young player still at school, and the quality of their sleep. Okay, so that's the first step in the template. You ask the player to identify 3 areas under each of the pillars that's important to them in their game. Step 2, you'll ask the player then, or the player themselves will give themselves a score out of 10. So just concern yourself with this column here to start off with. That's the scoring them out of 10. Now, I always say when I do this with the player, you're scoring yourself against the best in Ireland. All right, so 10 would be like of some of the Dublin players, like of Fenton or Kilkenny, those really top end players. You know, you're scoring yourself against the best. So this player, they've probably been realistic enough, and they've identified their ability to perform repeated sprints. 6 out of 10, not bad. Their upper body strength probably needs a bit of work. Their shooting accuracy needs a bit of work. Tackling technique, a bit big one here, pre-game routine, their ability to cope with mistakes and discipline. They've scored themselves quite low. So that's, I suppose, should be jumping out to you as a player, jumping out to you as a coach, as the areas that need actually developed. One thing I would say from experience of doing this with players, particularly young players, sometimes they can be overconfident, and I've seen some players giving themselves all 9 and 10s, and it's not actually very realistic that they would be at that. And say, for example, they're only under 17s or under 16s. So if they are scoring themselves high, you kind of have to make the point to them that they have to leave some kind of room for improvement. Moving on, so what you've done now, you've actually identified the areas. You give yourself a score of where you currently feel that you are. Then what you ask the player to do is to give yourself a score out of 10 for 12 months' time. So say you sit back down and do the exact same exercise in 12 months' time. Where do you want to be? Okay, and I go back to the thing I said, I think in the first slide or the second slide, your job as a player is to consistently improve and get better. How often have we seen it, young players with potential not getting any better? And in fact, year on year, they probably regress a wee bit. My belief in that is, or part of the reason for that would be, it's never actually been pointed out to them what it is that they need to actually work on. Okay, so again, from a coaching point of view, or indeed from a player point of view, always be very aware of that. Okay, so where you are now will not be good enough in 12 months' time. It's your job to consistently improve. Obviously, the areas with the low scores can now become goals which you aim to achieve. All right. How many areas, I suppose you would ask, how many areas would you try to change or try to improve in 12 months? I would say it's a maximum of 3. It wouldn't be realistic to say that you could take all of these areas mentioned here and get your scores up dramatically. All right, so I would say they maybe pick the 3 lowest ones. So maybe the pre-game routine, the discipline, the tackling technique, something like that, and take those, really focus in on those areas. And again, that can be something for you as a coach, really to set actions with your player. I suppose that's the next step. All right, so you've identified the areas where you're strong. This player's strong, obviously, in a few areas. The speed off the mark's good, but there are some areas for improvement. And again, how it works is you've got to set the actions then. You've got to, set goals, which we'll move on to later, as to where you want to be in 12 months' time. And if you don't do that, basically, you're probably going to stay where you are, or you're going to regress. Quite often, it can be difficult when you're sitting down with players. I suppose maybe it could be awkward or whatever, and maybe they're only young players, and they find it actually hard to think on the spot. Physically, what's important to me, in particular, tactically, they find it actually hard to think. So I've included here a few example answers for each of the pillars. Okay, and I'll go down through them very quickly. So endurance, strength, agility, flexibility, legs, speed, core strength, leg power, jumping, reaction time. Those are all examples. Not to say that you have to use those examples, but they're the examples that I've seen come up before. Sometimes actually in physical as well, when you're dealing with older players that are carrying injuries and things like that, it'll be more around prehab and actually getting yourself into a state to get onto the field. And that becomes your focus in the physical area. Technical, so again, our skills: catching, passing, shooting, tackling, kickouts, carrying the ball, soloing, your first touch, diving. I think that's for a goalkeeper. Tactical, so your movement, your spatial awareness, your decision making, your positioning, choice of kick out, knowledge of opposition. Big thing there, knowledge of opposition has crept into the game as well. Reading of the game, your vision, and knowing your role. The mental side of things, again, young players struggle, when you ask them, put them on the spot and ask them, what is it mentally? Where are you strong? Where are you weak? So your communication on the pitch, your confidence, your preparation, your resilience, concentration, your leadership, dealing with mistakes, staying focused, and the lifestyle. Again, the stuff away from the pitch, but maybe has a contribution to what happens on the pitch. So your schoolwork, your diet, hydration, your general health, nutrition, sleep, having that balance, having the social time, your time management, not overtraining. Quite often we find a lot of young players, they're involved in multiple teams, and it can be difficult for them, to not to overtrain. So being wary of that as well, and relationships. Okay, and again, if you've got time on your hands, maybe a lot of us do have time on our hands now with the current circumstances. You can see the players put their scores just into an Excel document. And again, maybe people are very visual now. They can see it better when it's plotted on a graph. So I think what the blue line represents on the spider diagram is where they currently are, and the red represents where they want to be in 12 months' time. So again, that's up to yourself. If it's something that you have time to do, or something that you think would be of benefit to yourself or to the players that you're working with, by all means, go ahead. Okay, so that's basically the pillars of performance covered. Again, that's maybe a fancy term for it. It's just identifying your strengths and weaknesses, and I think we should all sit back at times and do that as players or as coaches who are mentoring players. You know, take the time to see you know, where am I? Where am I at the minute? What am I doing well? What's the things that are letting me down? And again, I often get asked by managers, how do you manage a one-to-one with players? You know, can it be awkward, or how do you get your point across to them? You know, I think this template's ideal if you know, for a one-to-one scenario, because again, it's player led. You can sit down. There's a structure to it. You know, you're asking them, where do you think you are physically? Right, where do you think you are technically, tactically? You actually, as a coach, you mightn't be that interested in those areas, but they might come to one of the areas. Maybe the player has a problem with focus or their confidence or whatever. And once you get to that bit, you can maybe tease a wee bit more out of them, or maybe, I suppose, try to get your point across to them about how you feel, how they could improve. So it is. I think it's a very, very valuable tool. It's a very, very valuable structure to have, and I suppose to keep on record. Mentioning one-to-ones, quite often, again, as coaches, we're busy people, you know, and you think, God, I've got 30 players, you know, how can I get around them all? Maybe it's not realistic in normal circumstances to get around them all, but if you do find that you've got time on your hands, or you want to communicate with your players, or a number of your players, maybe you've had a team last year and you're familiar with 80% of them, and you've got another new group coming in, another 20% coming in, maybe you could focus on them. Or maybe, as I say, you do have a lot of your time in your hands at the minute because there's no games, there's no training, there's nothing going on at the minute. Maybe it's something that you can do to touch base with your players, get that work covered before we get back to the pitch. I see somebody has come in there. Kevin has come in. What age would you start doing this? I suppose, Kevin, I would start reflecting on this in around maybe 16, 17. Okay, I think up to that, it's more about developing the skills, letting the players develop. I don't see that players younger than that actually having the maturity to actually sit down and assess themselves. So I would say, yeah, in around 16, 17, even 18, you know, that they can actually sit down and they've got the maturity to actually self-reflect and reflect on their own game. Okay, I'll take some more questions towards the end. We'll move on, and as I say, I'm on my own here tonight. Normally we have somebody else in the background, but I'm on my own here tonight, so it's hard for me to present and balance the questions as well. But we'll take some more questions towards the end. So listen, I'm going to move on from the pillars of performance. Hopefully that has been of benefit. Moving on to another topic that's very, very closely linked then to the pillars of performance is goal setting. And goal setting is a very, very wide area. And I appreciate we've got a very, very wide group on the call tonight. You know, somebody's will be parents, somebody's will be players, somebody will be coaches. All right. So what I'll try to do is I'll try to tailor it as very much as I can for each of those groups. But to start off with, why is goal setting important? Okay, it's a skill that you can use to maximize your performance. It involves identifying what you want to accomplish and devising a plan to assist you in fulfilling your ambitions. And you can see the wee graphic that I put in there. We put in a sat nav. All right, so it's what goal setting kind of is getting you from where you are now to where you want to be. Okay, and I heard a phrase when I was, I suppose, preparing for this. If you aim at nothing, you'll get there every time. Okay, so goal setting is so important, and hopefully everybody's, I suppose, views or the way they approach goal setting will be different. But hopefully, the next few slides will give you a few ideas how you can approach it. Okay, Goal setting helps you feel more confident. Feel more in control. Okay, so you're concentrating on the important things. Maintain motivation. All right, when see goals, whenever you set goals and you can see you're getting closer to them, or you're achieving them, that maintains motivation. Tied into that, it increases effort to push harder. It'll build confidence, and as I've mentioned there, concentrate on the important things and provide you with direction. All right, so quite often, as I say, young players, there's so much information coming at you from everywhere. You've maybe got a coach in school telling you one thing, one in the club telling you another thing, a parent telling you another thing, and quite often it can be hard. You can be pulled all different directions. It can be hard to know what it is that you want to actually concentrate on. I think by setting goals, it actually gives you that you're concentrating on the important things, 1 to 2 key things that you can follow, and not really giving too much attention to anything else. Okay, when we're setting goals, I suppose one of the ways that's recommended is the SMART goal setting protocol. So basically, what the SMART represents is your goal has to be specific. Okay, so state exactly what you want to accomplish. It has to be measurable. So use small mini goals to measure progress. It has to be achievable to make your goal realistic or reasonable. Realistic, set a goal that is relevant to your life, and it has to be timely. Okay, give yourself time, but set a deadline. Now, I think it is important that I cover this, the SMART goal setting protocol. It's maybe more realistic to somebody involved in an individual sport. Okay, so I'm thinking like a swimmer or a runner where they, I suppose, compete maybe once every couple of months, and the time in between is all spent around getting a second or 0.5 of a second off your time or whatever. Gaelic football and hurling isn't like that. You know, it's very different from that. Once you're in the thick of it, once you're in the season, and the games are coming every week. So I'll speak more about that later. I'll continue with the SMART goal setting protocol and show you how you can actually set goals that way, and then we'll move on to the other one in a few minutes. So goal setting, and again, these templates, I'll show you where they can be found before the end of the webinar. So it's important to set your goal why. All right, so why do you want to do it? So this player has written down to improve my shooting as it's currently weak, with approximately only 50% of my shots going over the bar. So they've been really, really specific here. They haven't said, I want to get better at shooting. Okay, you know, so they put down, I want to get better at shooting. This is the reason why, and this is the measure of you know, it's a low score. It's 50% of the shots going over the bar. Next, what you would ask the player to do is to actually have a plan of action. So 3 steps to get to where you need to go for. So they've identified their shooting is letting them down. So the first thing is to ask advice from my coach on how I can improve my technique. 2 is to practice shooting in competitive practice situations 3 times a week with the aim of improving by 10%. So again, we're tying into all the SMART things. You know, it's measurable, it's achievable, it's time. You know, he's going to do it 3 times a week. It's timely. And the third thing is to practice my shooting after fitness or conditioning so that I can maintain my focus even when I'm tired. All right. Now, so he set his goal. He or she set their goal. They've got a plan of action. Now, I think it's smart to actually identify or to preempt the obstacles that they might come across. So this player's obstacles are not getting to practice in a competitive situation 3 days a week due to lack of facilities or study time, whatever it is. So they've identified what the obstacles may be, and the possible solutions are using the time I do have to practice with focus and intent, making it as competitive as possible, or to watch past videos of myself where I've shot well and focus on the positives. So again, that's one way of goal setting. And again, it's probably more focused around skills or fitnesses or stuff that can be worked on away from the team environment. Okay, as I said, the SMART principle, it was big back 2 or 3 years ago. Depending on your situation, it can work for you, but it's maybe not as relevant as the next way I'm going to show you. Okay, and this is the reality, I suppose, of when you're involved in a season. Okay, so you play the game. Whether you're a coach or a player, you play the game, you review your performance after the game, whether you win or lose, you review it, you try to put it right in training or in practice, and then you play another game. And it's just that's the reality of Gaelic football, hurling, whatever sport that it is. Once you're in the middle of the season, okay, so your goals that you set outside of that might actually not be relevant. You know, you could have set goals to win your first 4 games or win your championship, and all of a sudden you're beating your first 4 games, or you're out of the championship, and those goals go out the window. So my advice would be is to use the form that I'm going to show you next. Okay, and again, just to re-emphasize that the reality is that you play your game, you review your performance, and then you try to put those things right in training or in practice and play again. Okay, so I apologize, this is a bit small. You can log into the website and you'll be able to see it. You'll be able to print these off. But basically how it works is the player or the coach can set the individual goals before the match. Okay, so this is a player, for example, setting the goals. So their first goal is to get more touches of the ball earlier in the match. I didn't touch the ball for 8 minutes in the last match. The second thing is positioning. Get into a defensive position early to avoid them breaking down the middle and be in position to press the ball. And the third thing they've identified for this particular game is discipline. Don't react to a poor call by the referee or a mistake made by teammates. So that's basically how it works. An individual can sit down and before the match and actually set these goals, go ahead, play the game, and then the next thing they can do is sit down and review. So did they achieve, after the game, did they achieve all these things? So this player has identified, yes, they've achieved them. What I did well. Okay, so the player's identifying what they've done well. So he or she stayed disciplined in the tackle when my opponent took me on. I made myself available for outlet passes when we turned the opposition over. And I won 3 break balls, something I haven't been doing recently. So they've identified what they did well. It's also important for them after the game to identify what can we do better. Okay, so communicate with teammates when under pressure, improve my shooting, I kick 2 wides, and increase my ability to perform repeated sprints. I struggle to support the attack in the last 5 minutes. So how does that work? Remember, we talked about our process. Basically, you've played the game, you've reviewed the game. Now, where do you put it right? You put it right in training. Okay, so this player has identified that what they're going to do in training is they're going to practice 20 shots from realistic positions after the session, and attack fitness work with 100% effort to improve my ability to perform repeated sprints in games. Okay, so that's their actual goals that they've set for the next training session. And again, what they've done as well, and probably your more conscientious players will do this, give themselves a score. You know, how they performed in that game. So their overall score, their performance was 7, their mental attitude was 6, their preparation for the game was 7, and the recovery, they give themselves an 8 out of 10. Now again, as I say, I'm conscious that this mightn't be relevant to everybody in the call. Quite often we'll have coaches on the call here as well, but it's the exact same process. Okay, if you're sitting down with your team, these are individual goals. If you're sitting down with your team, you can set 3 actual team goals for the match. So things what that might be. So win your kickouts, or win a certain percentage of your kickouts, win the turnovers. Okay, only concede maybe 6-7 points in the first half. So things like that. Whatever that is, and I'm sure coaches out there can visualize what's important to you. What's the goals that you want to meet, or the stats that you want to meet in the game. So you've set those, you've agreed those with your players, and that it's very important that you don't set any more than 3. 1, 2, 3. Anything more than 3 probably isn't realistic for your players. So I would set down 3 clear goals for that game, and players love that. I feel that players will love you actually breaking it down for them as coaches. You know, this is the 3 key things that we need to do today, or we're being asked to do. So that's basically before the match, or the Thursday night before the match on the Sunday or whenever. Set those 3 goals and then play the match and review them. Okay, sit down with your players. So quite often a lot of teams now will sit down and do the video work. So it's important that you review your goals as well. Did you achieve these things? Okay, what did we do well? And that's all the time encouraging player feedback, and players respect being asked their opinion as well. And we talk a lot of it now about being player led and things like that. So players will contribute to what they did well. They'll also contribute to what they did better. And again, I suppose the thing that I'm going to bang on about this is, you've set your goals, you've reviewed your goals. You're going to set goals in training now to actually the things that you're going to work on the Tuesday night and on the Friday night before the next game to actually get it right for the next game. Okay, so as I say, I find that just to be a wee bit more effective than the smarter model, because again, as I say, it's the world that we live in. Okay, you play, you review, you train, and your goals are constantly changing. All right. Okay, basically I've got through that pretty quickly. But hopefully now you can understand how to profile your strengths and weaknesses as a player. You can identify the areas that need extra attention. You'll understand the importance of goal setting, and you'll understand how to set goals to improve performance. One thing I would say is, all the resources that I've shown tonight, they're all on the Ulster GAA microsite. So it's called the Performance and Lifestyle microsite, or PALS for short. So again, if you can see the website's up there, it's www.ulster.ga/PALS. And like you say, the performance profiling, the goal setting, there's a lot of information there around concentration, nutrition, hydration. There's a bit around player welfare, concussion, anti-doping, health and well-being. So there's a lot of content in there, but you will find the resources that I've used tonight. They're downloadable. You can print them out and use them, as I say, whether you're a player or a coach, or whatever circumstances that you're in there. If there's any questions, go ahead and put them into the chat there now. I say I'll not be able to take them all, but I'll be able to take maybe 2 or 3. I'm just going to go through a couple of questions here that had been sent through when you registered. The first one is, when you're setting goals, from what point of interaction with your players, e.g. very first session or later when you know them better? So I think what that's asking is, when do you actually set the goals? Do you do it the very first night? I would say no. I wouldn't set your goals the first night. I think you have enough to do the first night to try to communicate what you're trying to do as a coach, and to get you to know your players. I would say get things up and running first, get the communication really good, get your players buying into what you're about and what you want to do. And then it's a good idea actually to set the goals a couple of weeks in. Once you know I suppose the leaders in the group as well, because a lot of the goal settings player led as well. So those leaders can you can break them into groups and get the feedback that way. Okay, the second one that I have there is, how do you set team goals without being linked to competitive results? Okay, so I think what that's asking me is, sometimes you're involved in a team where you can't always win. You can't always win, but I don't think the goal setting changes in the slightest. I think it's very, very important, as going back to the very first slide, is it's not about winning. It's about maximizing your potential and being the best version of yourself. So that's what I would say. You can set so many goals. So how much you concede, say in a first half, how much you concede in a second half, how competitive you are on kickouts, how many turnovers you're giving away, all those things. And I think players actually should be encouraged to focus on the process of what they do in a game, rather than actually what the score is, or who's winning or who's losing. Okay. Basically, there's one there. Trevor has asked a question. Thanks, Ryan. Are individual goals player-led or coach-led? Okay. I think the skill is, as a coach, your communication. Okay. You, I suppose, put it out there where you think the team's going and what you would like to see achieved. Okay. So you're maybe, it's not to say you're brainwashing your players a wee bit, but I think it's your job to maybe motivate the players or to inspire the players a wee bit as to what they can achieve in a certain season. So I think you put it out there first, and then I think you allow the players to, I suppose, contribute to that as well, and again, I think there's a skill there in getting your leaders, the guys that are on your side, or the guys that are the leaders within the group, and let them lead the groups, and hopefully you'll be on the same page in terms of the goals that you're setting for the year. Are there any books, journals, diaries, etc. produced by the GAA that are designed specifically for players to record, reflect over the course of a season? I'm not aware of any others there, but I would say once you go into the PALS website, you can download the match goal setting template. And again, it's just an individual sheet. And I would say that you can, players can for every game that they play, they can download that and they can keep that themselves for their own records. Is it okay to set targets such as winning a championship? That's a good question somebody's asked there. I suppose that's what's called an outcome goal. All right. So that's sometimes you have very, very little control in setting out a goal like that. Okay. And I think it's important that you set it, but you probably speak about it at the start of a season. So whether that's winning a championship, winning a league, staying up, whatever your current circumstances are. But, when I say that can be out of your control, a few injuries could wipe that out completely. A player getting sent off, a bad refereeing decision, a really bad weather conditions, something like that. All those things could contribute to wiping that goal out. So what I would say is, yes, that you should set that goal at the start of the season. It's okay to do that. But what you should probably focus more on are the wee day-to-day things, and what you want. What are the goals we want to achieve in the match, and what are the goals actually that we want to achieve in training as well. And they become the goals that you give your energy to. And I think anybody that's really focusing on those goals and achieving those goals, the outcome or the winning the championship can come with that, rather than actually setting that goal and just talking about it, because, as I say, it's out of your control on a lot of occasions. So again, set it, yes, but always have the smaller goals to achieve in games and in training to make that a reality. Okay. And I think this is the last one. Is there a danger with some teams of feeling your goals are unrealistic, and how would you deal with it? Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, I think, listen, it does have to be, goals do have to be realistic. You know what I mean? I think if you feel that the goal is realistic, I think that's your skill as a coach to actually motivate the players to get them to believe it. Okay, and reasons why you genuinely think that goal can be achieved. Yeah, so I suppose the skill comes in where you actually sell it to the players. Because again, if you come out with something that's really unrealistic and the players start laughing or whatever, it's probably not a good start. So I would say is you've got to keep it realistic. But again, the other flip side of that is you've got to be ambitious as well. So striking the balance there with that, and really, as I say, the skill there is really in how you sell it to the players and why you think that it can be achieved. Okay, so folks, that's it. We're nearly going an hour. I'll not take any more questions. I would emphasize to you, if you want any of these resources, I want to read a wee bit more around the areas of pillars of performance and goal setting. It's all on the PALS website, so the www.ulster.gaa.ie/PALS, and this recording will also be uploaded to the Ulster GAA YouTube page in the next couple of days. Okay, so listen, thanks for listening, thanks for your time, and all the best.